Hello there, my very good friends. Andy here for What Culture Wrestling, and I have one very special favour to ask of you today. Cast your minds, if you please, back to the 6th of October 1997 episode of Monday Night Raw. At this point, we are really deep into the fascinating on-screen adaptation of the bitter, toxic backstage feud between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Now at this point, Triple H, Shawn Michaels and Chyna haven't yet formed D-Generation X, but going by the opening 20 minutes of this episode, you wouldn't really know it. This was transgressive, bratty, and really childish television. During it, we get Triple H and Chyna sending Michael Cole into the rafters with a wedgie, and Shawn Michaels asking Vince McMahon, and I quote, if his father is rolling in his grave with paternal embarrassment. As you can tell, it's lovely stuff. Now at one point during a heated verbal confrontation between Hart and the gathered miscreants, Michaels says this, "Come on, you were an ass long before I made one out of you." The hitman tries to interrupt here, and in the most hilariously insincere tone imaginable, Shawn just kinda quips, "Yes, Bret Hart?" At this point, Hart is pretty much a marked man, and after droning on and on about being an upstanding second-generation professional wrestler, he unleashes this really brutal, really kinda gross, homophobic rant. Michaels proceeds to destroy him with a non-verbal shot. He pretends to clutch at his gonads, that's his bollocks of course, and then opens his mouth in a big O just like a fish. Kinda like this. I'm not a very good fish. Triple H unfortunately hadn't quite mastered the non-verbal arts just yet, and that meant he needed a literal nudge from his buddy to create what would eventually become an iconic Titantron visual. This is the point where things get dicey, and if you're wondering why I'm still flapping these papers around like an idiot, it's because I'm going to quote to you what Bret Hart said verbatim. Remember, this is what the wrestlers exactly, word for word, said to each other. It's really quite terrible, but remember, at the same time, it's a really key part of the Attitude Era so many people claim to want back, so you can't really have it both ways. Hart says, "I know what the HHH stands for in HBK." He's totally flustered by Michaels and Triple H at this point, and he continues with, "You know what, man, I can't say that. No chance." If you want to find out what it is, you can check out the precise moment when Hart gets super homophobic down below. We've left a link down there, and when you view it, you'll understand why I'm not going to quote it. What happened here was Bret saying some really offensive and problematic things that made him seem like the most insecure and brittle man in the building. And that's what's key. And unfortunately, Triple H at this stage was way more Bret than he was Shawn. He got super defensive, almost to the point of hilarity, when he grabbed the microphone and insisted that he was indeed a heterosexual. This is a near perfect distillation of Triple H at his most insecure. In the shark-infested waters of the early Attitude Era, he was, and this is pretty ironic, generally regarded as something of a B+ player around bigger stars, bigger names like The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Having risen higher up the ranks as the new leader of the now formalized DX in 1998, displaying some genuine comedic chops along the way, there were a few moments when Hunter really came unstuck as a performer, a personality, and an ego. He was all too keen to maintain the image that he'd created for himself as the coolest kid in the row, and once famously said during a guest commentary spot, "I'm by a lot of things, but lingual ain't one of them." I'm sure that sounded better in his head. Make no mistake, Triple H was really over in 1998, but there was always something that seemed really forced about his act. He was the biggest obstacle on his own road to megastardom. With a main event mega push looming, Triple H turned heel the following year. He faced and beat The Rock in a strap match at Fully Loaded, and this was all part of his preparation to face off at SummerSlam in a big, defining match with Steve Austin and Mankind. Either afraid of someone else rising up and potentially taking his spot, or in an earnest protection of the business he'd helped rebuild, Stone Cold just didn't want to face Hunter 101. He didn't want to lose to him. He didn't want to take the fall. So what did he do? he politicked Mick Foley into the match as the pin eater. Perhaps because The Rock had so thoroughly incinerated Triple H throughout their various verbal joustings, Austin just didn't want to lose to a guy he viewed as somebody playing, not being, an elite main event level performer. Now Triple H was no joke, but he was ripe for parodia because for some reason he added this inflection in which he added this weird noise to every second word every time he got on the microphone to rant about this business. Now, of course, what I've done there is a rather pathetic and feeble attempt at The Rock's classic promo, but it remains one of the most cutting character assassinations in WWE history. We only really remember Triple H's pre-game loading screen with one noise as a result of it, and a very sheepish Triple H chose to abandon said inflection in the near aftermath. But that promo, that assassination was very much the making of the game. He was thoroughly embarrassed by The Rock and surpassed by Austin, but as the year progressed, he genuinely rose to their level. Backed by Stephanie McMahon as part of their fiendish and inspired regime storyline, something, and I'm not sure what, allowed Triple H to maraud backstage with the utmost confidence. Assisted in the ring by Foley, who on this basis might be the greatest transitional champion in WWE history, it is here at this point in the video where the faint praise ends. It is here in the year 2000 when Triple H genuinely became the best professional wrestler on the planet. And I'm not even doing a bit here. In the year 2000, Triple H, a man who previously only dropped his own trousers with the intent of making a joke at someone else's mistake, showed genuine ass. He had started to follow his own advice that once set into motion the events of the Montreal Screwjob. He did big business. For most of the year 2000, Triple H was at his best because he was at his most secure. Having utilised the selflessness and the artistry of Mick Foley as a blood-splattered canvas on which to paint himself as a warrior, Triple H entered full ring general maturity. He was on his A game, and not just against those willing to bleed for the cause. The guy felt secure enough to give Taka Michinoku a competitive match in a minor TV classic. It was framed as an easy out for Triple H, but it was performed as something greater. Viewed through WWE's lens, Taka, while obviously a talented performer, was pretty much the opposite of the company's ideal WWE champion. He was a short, skinny Japanese undercard comedy act, and yet Triple H gave him a lot in that match, including one heart-stopping near fall. Hunter bumped like a madman for Michinoku throughout a blistering start, taking the shine knowing full well that he was about to obliterate the Japanese wrestler with a devastating lariat over the top rope. Triple H, humiliated and pissed off as a result of Taka's spirited performance, chose to drive his boot right into his opponent's throat. It drew the ire of referee Earl Hebner, and it set us up for what was about to come. This manifested in that awesome near fall, and a moment that really underscored Triple H's brilliance as a performer at that time. He almost lost to a joke comedy character, and yet he lost none of his aura for it. Now, by the 27th of July episode of SmackDown, Mick Foley's role as WWE Commissioner had really undermined Triple H's position as some kind of authority. As a result of one of their many squabbles, Foley decided that he would put Triple H in an unwinnable position. He was going to face off against The Rock and his wife Stephanie McMahon in a tag match, and who would his partner be? Trish Stratus. Now, of course, later in her career, Trish would become one of the most important women's wrestlers in WWE history, but at that stage, well, in kayfabe and reality, she just kind of wasn't all that good. So Triple H had to help her out. We got a backstage segment in which Triple H was showing Trish a bunch of different holds, and at one point, he started showing her how to counter her way out of a hammerlock. The problem was that Stephanie McMahon walked in just as Trish was bent over in front of him. To Steph, this of course looked like a dry hump. So what did she do? She stormed out of the room, and this prompted Jerry Lawler, who I'm definitely not going to do an impression of, to squeal. He got his hand caught in the cookie jar. The idea of Triple H canoodling with Trish was enough to fracture his marriage with Stephanie, and thus kicked off the events, leading to the eventual love triangle angle with Kurt Angle. Angle, 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 triangle, angle, angle, angle. Good. It was a unique and very over plot development, a believable soap opera if you will. But Triple H soon pumped the brakes. To Hunter, the notion that Stephanie would somehow be interested in Angle, the square-jawed Clark Kent of Olympic glory, just wasn't viable, and as a result, months and months of long-term planning had to be torn up and rewritten. That old insecurity had returned to the detriment of the WWE fans and their perception of Triple H as a character. Now, Triple H remained an insane, astonishing superworker all the way up to his quad tear in May 2001. But that renewed refusal to show ass would eventually shape his complex legacy as a performer. In 2000, Triple H was the consensus best wrestler in the world, but for him, that wasn't enough. The man entered pro wrestling to become the greatest, and he was driven towards that at times by a pathetic level of hubris. Now, that's not to say that Triple H was never the same. That would be a quite ridiculous statement. Just think of WrestleMania 27 and 28. Those Undertaker matches were incredible and their drama was on another level. Triple H then went full Foley in his attempt at putting Batista over as the next big WWE megastar. And of course, in 2002, he put forth one of his career's best performances against Shawn Michaels, who he'd brought back into the company in that unsanctioned war at SummerSlam. And that set the table for some of the best WWE programming of the whole decade. And yet, in the years that followed, he just couldn't help himself. The game could not put the controller down. He essentially told several mid-card acts to suck it, either by taking the piss out of their act or by literally kicking him in the balls. Then, on the few occasions he did put someone beneath him in the pecking order over, such as Jeff Hardy, he kind of did it with a literal shrug, as if his opponent was just a little puppy out enjoying his day. How quaint. At one point, he even told video game developers THQ that under no circumstances could they show him in promotional material showing any signs of weakness. Apparently that, even in a simulation of a simulation, was unbearable to the man's fragile ego. When Triple H got his hand caught in the cookie jar, he couldn't bear the embarrassment. The man could never take a joke at his own expense, and he invited further career-long mockery as a direct result of that. Anyway guys, my take over. Your take, the comment section. Head down there now, tell us what you think, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Once you've done that, you can ring the bell for notifications, you can head over to Twitter, you can follow us at What Culture WWE, and myself at Andy H. Murray, if you're into that kind of thing. But for now, I've been Andy, bye bye.